So Daredevil Born Again is back, and instead of just one episode, we actually got 2 episodes released back to back. Let's get right into it, because today we're talking Daredevil Born Again Season 2, Episode 2 and 3, breakdown and review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, getting into Episode 2 and 3, let's just go over some of the things that I really enjoyed about these 2 episodes, and then some things that I may have had a couple issues with. So starting out with some of the things that I really liked, I absolutely loved the moments that we got in the hospital with Jerry, surrounded by all the retired police officers and also current police officers, finally sticking up to the task force. This really has been something that's been driving me crazy, that no one is standing up to the task force at all, whether it be other heroes that for whatever reason aren't getting involved, or other law enforcement in New York City. So the fact that they are finally doing this and doing it to stick up for one of their own is something I actually really liked. One of the other things that I actually really liked about these episodes was everything surrounding White Tiger. Now, in this series, it is Angela, who is the niece of White Tiger. However, I'm assuming that they will eventually have her don the mantle of the White Tiger, and I'm assuming they are just going to merge aspects of her character with the character of Ava Ayala, who is traditionally the daughter of White Tiger and then takes over the mantle from him after he is killed. This actually got adapted into the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, and in my opinion, she was one of the absolute best parts of that series. She was definitely one of the top characters in that series, one of the most intriguing characters, and they actually did an entire episode surrounding her father's demise. So if we get anything as far as her becoming White Tiger, that would be really awesome, and it would be something that I would find extremely compelling. But speaking of other heroes, we actually finally got a mention of the Punisher, and the fact that Karen actually would prefer if Frank was there helping them out. And this actually gives us a pretty interesting conversation between Karen and Matt, not only just mentioning the Punisher, but it starts a debate between the two of them about how they should handle this situation. And not only that, if it's okay to kill Wilson Fisk and or Vanessa, especially after everything that happened because of them. The death of Foggy, how New York City is right now. That's all a direct result from the actions of Wilson Fisk and Vanessa. So Karen brings up a pretty valid point. However, Matt once again shuts this down like he always does. You cannot just kill them. And I will say by this point, it does make sense. That conversation was pretty interesting. However, I do feel like it was retreading a lot of things that we often go over with Daredevil. That is actually one of my gripes with this series. Aside from season 2, pretty much every plot point is just recycled and repeated, slightly altered. However, not even that much. That's why I personally find season 2 to be the most compelling out of anything we've got from Daredevil, the original Daredevil series, not Daredevil Born Again season 2. However, speaking of things that I am a fan of with these 2 episodes, Daredevil's lie detector returning, which he realistically hasn't used since I believe season 2. However, it might actually go all the way back to season 1, which is pretty silly. However, I am glad that he is using it once again. They're interrogating someone that they did capture from the task force, and it is starting to show Karen becoming darker and darker. I feel like that is going to be a theme they go down this season. However, like I mentioned before, that does feel somewhat like just retreading the past, something they did a little bit in season 1, something they also did a little bit in season 2 when she started to befriend the Punisher. That did cause her to get a little bit darker. So I feel like if they just keep doing the same things over and over again, it is going to get incredibly boring, and not to mention incredibly predictable. That's basically it as far as the things I actually enjoyed from these 2 episodes. The whole prison break thing with Daredevil and the swordsman helping him was decently cool. The choreography and the action weren't horrible. They weren't absolutely spectacular, but it was at least a little bit enjoyable. However, I think the part that I actually liked most about this entire sequence is before Daredevil even gets in there and he's actually using the sounds that his partner at the law firm heard when she did have to go in there, but she was blindfolded, and he is retracing all of her steps using all of the sounds that she heard to help navigate to the correct spot. That was actually really cool and a pretty unique thing to do. I don't think they've ever done that in this series before, including back to the original Daredevil series. So anytime they do something new like that, I will absolutely be there for it. However, that is essentially all that I liked about these two episodes. And then we have to get into some of the other things that I really did not like about these episodes. The task force is just getting absolutely absurd. The amount of people that they are just rounding up, and then as you saw, they can just keep them prisoner. That makes absolutely no sense. You're never going to be able to convince me that no other heroes are intervening, that no high up law enforcement agency is looking into this and seeing that this is actually really crazy. However, I will say at least the governor is starting to have an issue with it. However, even though she is starting to show issues with it, Wilson Fisk is still quite literally doing whatever he wants with the help of his task force. And to me, it just makes absolutely no sense. It is absurd and quite frankly pretty stupid. That's pretty much the end of my rant there. But going on to another rant, Heather is probably one of, if not the most insufferable character in the entire series. Every time she is on screen, I just get progressively more and more annoyed. I'm getting to the point where I absolutely despise her character. And I think the point that really drove it home for me in this episode was the entire interaction where she was comparing what happened to her with Muse to what other people experience with vigilantes. And I wish that the person she was talking to in that moment just grabbed a hold of her and said, "You were attacked by a serial killer wearing a mask. He was not a vigilante. How stupid are you to compare a psychopath serial killer to vigilantes? It makes no sense. If you would compare him to the Punisher, okay, I guess I could understand that at least to a degree. However, aside from the fact that they both kill people, they are not similar at all. The Punisher kills bad people. You, at that time, were not a bad person. You were someone who was targeted by a psychopath. These are very different things. And I also think that they are trying to paint Bullseye as a vigilante, which also to me doesn't make a lot of sense. He is a villain, not really a vigilante in any way. So I feel like the two people that they are using a lot to prop up vigilantes as being these really bad people are Bullseye and Muse, which both are just outright villains. So it's something else that is definitely starting to bother me. But all in all, Heather is just an absolutely horrible character. And honestly, I don't see her character improving at all. I actually see her character just getting worse and worse as she continues to go down this dark path. And I realistically don't see any way that she gets any type of redemption. However, probably the thing that I disliked most about these episodes was we did not have any sighting of Mr. Charles. Yes, Matthew Lillard's character from episode 1, who was so captivating when he was on screen, he was so enjoyable to watch, and the fact that we didn't get him at all in either of these two episodes was definitely really disappointing in my opinion. He was probably my favorite aspect of episode 1 and one of the only things that I was genuinely looking forward to throughout this series. And considering we have less than 10 episodes in this season, having 2 full episodes without him is definitely a huge bummer. Now, going on to one of my big predictions for this series, I genuinely think either BB Urich or Daniel are going to die. I personally think if BB is going to be the one to die, it will be at the hands of Daniel, or if Daniel dies, it is going to be because Wilson Fisk does find out that he knew who was leaking information, didn't tell Fisk, so he would see this as a betrayal and kill Daniel, or Daniel might have a shift in character and try to defend BB Urich, which would lead to his ultimate demise. He even said it himself in these episodes that being good and having integrity isn't always worth the cost, so I feel like that is a little bit of foreshadowing, and eventually he is going to realize that having integrity is actually worth it. However, unfortunately, it will come at the cost of his life. But I'm interested to hear from all of you. What did you think of these 2 episodes? Did you miss Mr. Charles as much as I did? And what do you think about my prediction for Daniel and BB Urich? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.